Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if this is your first time checking out the show, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you like what you hear. And if you're a returning listener, leave us that rating and review so we can hear what you like about the show and anything we can do to help you on your investing journey. Now, today we've got a fun show. We're going to be talking to Ligia and Mike. Ligia and Mike have been investing in real estate since 2006 while balancing demanding corporate careers. In 2016, they found themselves both unemployed with 2 daughters in college, a hefty mortgage, and plenty of other bills to pay. Now, they chose not to re-enter the corporate rat race. Definitely got to talk to them about that. But instead, they embarked on what they call Life 2.0. We're going to talk to them about that and much more. Let's welcome to the show, Ligia and Mike.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Listen, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Take 2 minutes and give us a little bit more context on your background.
Yeah, sure. So we both were in corporate America. I would say I followed, as Ligia did, what you would consider or what most people consider the standard path in life, right? You go to school, you get good grades, you exit school and you find a job and you climb the corporate ladder, or you try to, get a raise after raise, or maybe a new, job and promotion and kind of do that thing. And in 2006, I took an overseas assignment. I was with Nokia mobile phones at the time. So we were kind of one of the top mobile phones producers in the world. And I took an assignment to go overseas and open up a factory. And that was in Romania. And that's where Ligia happens to be from. And she was also working for Nokia in a slightly different division. But, we met right away and just sparks flew, kind of fell in love and just hit it off from there. But I was over there for about 3 years, interested in really just, making a career. And it was a great opportunity to go over and visit Europe and see sites. At the same time, I was on a really nice expat contract where, everything was paid for. So a lot of money was going into the bank. We were able to do some investments in that way. Well, in 2010, 11, we moved back to the US. Still in the corporate world. Not too long after that, Microsoft purchased Nokia, or at least the handset division of Nokia. So I went and became a Microsoft employee as a result of that acquisition. I was in a similar role. I was doing supply chain and operations for all of the Americas in a certain role. And we were living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, bought a nice home, had a couple of daughters that were teenagers, upper teenagers. As you mentioned, in 2016, for a couple of different reasons, Ligia was working in healthcare and her company was consolidating their base of operations and moving back to their headquarters, which was in Northwest Arkansas. And so, we were not going to move to Northwest Arkansas. And around the same time, most of my role I had outsourced to, third parties, other groups. And my role was really going to need to be in Washington, where Microsoft is headquartered, and, didn't want to move to Microsoft to continue a career there. So ended up, getting laid off at that point with a nice severance package. And so, like you mentioned, I started putting out resumes, had some interviews with more high-tech companies, most of which would involve some type of relocation to the West Coast. And I just had a knot in my stomach every time I would go for an interview or think about, what's the culture going to be like? Is it going to be more? I was traveling really heavily with my job as kind of a mid-level executive running a regional operation. And it just didn't feel good at all. And so we had we had explored a couple years earlier a side hustle. And that side hustle was land investing. It was basically buying and selling vacant land. And I had listened to a few podcasts of people that were doing it and making good money. And so we bought a toolkit, let's say, of a basic set of course materials, videos, kind of the basics on how to get started in land investing. Well, we had, I purchased that a year or two before 2016, and just because as it is when you're working a full-time job, it takes a lot of effort to then also start a side hustle. And so it was just sitting on the back shelf collecting dust, and we decided to go ahead and pull that off and give it a go. And so we signed up for a boot camp. We went and met some other land investors. We kind of went into it, and we had a nest egg at that point. The girls' college was set aside, and we had a bit of a safety net. And so we decided, let's just go all in this land investing, and we did. And at the same time, we decided, our large home in Plano, it was just the two of us. We didn't need it. So we decided to downsize and figured, if we could live anywhere we wanted to live, where would it be? And we're both drawn to mountains. So we came to Colorado and started our land business. And over the course of about 2 to 3 years, we built it up into a nice passive income stream. So just a high level business model. We buy land, we resell it to consumers, and we owner finance most of the purchases. And so we have 3, 5, 7-year notes that people are paying on over time. And so, once you start stacking those up, it becomes like a nice little passive income stream. It just, took a bit of time and effort. So it's active on the front end, but it's certainly passive on the back end. So over time, we built that into a really nice business, making, good 6-figure income. And the downside of it is coming with that is a hefty tax bill, right? So we're making all this income as entrepreneurs and not enjoying any level of other than our own business income, which are our business expenses that we're able to write off. We started looking for, in the spirit of Robert Kiyosaki and some of his disciples, how can we offset these tax bills and get as close as we can to tax-free income? So that has taken us into multifamily over the past couple of years, where, especially as real estate professionals, we can enjoy the full benefits of passive losses and depreciation and those types of things. So, for the past couple of years, we've been doing both. We still have our land business. It's a great business. The returns are just crazy, like, triple figures ROI. But we couple that with multifamily, which allows us to scale, both the investment side as well as the tax depreciation. And it's the combination of those two things has really delivered a great lifestyle for us. We love to be outdoors. We love to hike. We, as I mentioned, love the mountains. I think we were talking just before the podcast, just a couple months ago, we moved into what we considered kind of our dream home. It's been on our vision board for a while of a home we wanted to buy. And we're sitting up above 9,000 feet in a town called Woodland Park, outside of that town, really a little bit more remote. And, the city's motto is the city above the clouds. And so, quite literally on a few days, you see the clouds below you just coming in the valley. And yeah, it's amazing. So it's just, it's been a great ride, I would say.
Yeah, that's right.
I dominated that conversation. So I don't know if anything
It's all right. We're gonna give you a chance to talk
right.
to it, Ligia. Absolutely. Listen, I want to recap a little bit of that, Mike. So you talked about being in corporate America, working for Nokia, traveling on an assignment to Romania. That's where the two of you meet. In my mind, this is going to be like a love tale, right? So you meet, you fall in love immediately. You travel some more, move back to the States, and then ultimately at some point you realize, listen, 2016, your company wants you to relocate. Ligia's company wants her to relocate, and you say, you know what, we like it here. Let's not relocate right now. Why don't we actually go this other route with something that we've been working on? And that really took you into land investing. You said you were familiar with it. You were started to take some tools and some resources, some courses, but you hadn't really dove into it deep. Use that as a chance to pivot deeper into land investing. And that's really what sparked where you're at today. And then obviously we'll talk about how you've brought in multifamily investing to help offset the business growth you've had with land investing. I want to go back to kind of that moment in 2016, because it's something that I think many listeners can familiarize themselves with. And there's that point where you've got to decide, do you want to stay in corporate America or stay on the track that you've been on, or do you chase what could be? Do you chase a different lifestyle, recognizing that you don't know what's going to happen and it can be scary? You talked about having two daughters in college at the time. You had a little bit of money set aside, but on the same note, that's a pretty risky endeavor to take. Just walk me through kind of what was going on through your head. And I know you were toying with it because you were interviewing for other companies as well. So walk us through that time frame, and what advice would you give somebody who finds themselves in that similar position today?
Yeah, it's a great topic to spend some time on. And it's one, I agree with you. I think a lot of people, I'll say the word, get trapped into a certain lifestyle. So just speaking from my standpoint, when I recount that story, several factors presented themselves at a singular moment in time that really allowed me to have the mindset and let's just say the lack of fear, or to overcome that fear and step into the world of entrepreneurship. So I'm a first child. I'm an achiever. For me, it was always about getting great grades, having a stable career. And for me, that meant a W-2 job, the benefits that come with it in insurance and retirement planning, just all those types of things, as well as having a lifestyle. And we didn't live extravagantly by any means, but we had a nice house, 2 cars, all the trappings that come along with that. And so, there's my psyche is one of safety. That's kind of one of my top values is I want security in my life. And I kind of grew up with that, whether it was nature or nurture. It's hard to say kind of how that develops over time, but it's just a fact of where I was. And so at that particular moment in time, we empty nested. And so it was the two of us. Ligia is super supportive of anything we really want to do. And so, I had that level of, let's just call it a security factor that, the two of us could give something a try, risk a different lifestyle, and know that in the worst case scenario, Tim Ferriss kind of talks about fear setting. What could be the worst thing that happened? In the worst case scenario, we just have to go back and get new jobs or try something else. And as I mentioned, college was largely paid for. So I kind of felt that was something that I want to give my daughters in life was, an education should they choose to pursue it. And so, that having been set aside and those types of things. And so, those factors allowed me the confidence to step into entrepreneurship and to try something on our own, as well as the fact that, like I mentioned, we don't need an extravagant life. We don't kind of desire fancy cars or, a luxury house. Those things are nice. And it's not to say that we don't pursue those things, but they're not needs in our life. And so, all of those factors allowed us to kind of, like I mentioned, reboot into 2.0 and say, okay, let's step back. Let's put more humanistic values in front of capitalistic needs for 2, 3, 4 years. And, in stepping back, we can gain more by, pursuing this other path. And, that coupled with, I would say, the fears of getting back into a corporate job with, maybe the corporate culture is just a driving culture, as a lot of companies tend to be that. Not all companies by any means, but it's very much a results driven. They're going to squeeze as much out of you as can be. You lose, you gain some amount of safety, although that's arguable in today's day and age if you really are, safer in a corporate job as you are in an entrepreneurial job.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, as you say that, it's interesting because like you said, it's about fear, and you talk about fear setting. And I love that because you said the worst case scenario for you all at that moment was you have to go back and get jobs. So if you're looking at the situation as saying, all right, I'm already in the process of pursuing another job, I'm applying for opportunities, I'm doing interviews, but if I go with option B over here, well, the worst case is I just keep doing what I'm already doing. Right. So it actually allows you to really think logically, remove kind of the fear and the angst, and actually try something as opposed to simply doing it because that's what makes you feel secure, and that's what makes you feel safe. And you're right, because so many people, especially, you talk about being a first child and being somebody who understands, that there's a responsibility that you have. It's very easy just to fall back on that feeling, that comfort, the emotion of understanding like, hey, this is what normal is. This is what people do. You work until you hit that retirement age. But if you could step back and say, okay, what am I really trying to solve for there? What's the fear? What happens if this changes? And when you recognize that the answer is the same thing that you're doing, I think it does empower you to make some different decisions. Ligia, I'd love to hear from your standpoint, like as you were going through that process and, you're talking to Mike, what were you thinking? What were your concerns? What were your fears? And how did you approach that?
Well, I come from a background of, we lived, growing up in my family, we lived from paycheck to paycheck. So the safety need for me was very different than Mike's. The safety net definition was very different than Mike's.
And just not to interrupt you, but just to give more perspective on Ligia's story, I think she's going to be a little humble here, but like Ligia grew up until she was 14 in a communist country, right? She lived under a dictator in communist Romania until you were 14. And so life was extremely different from what I grew up in, but there's a little bit of a, that plays into that whole way of growing up you came into.
Obviously, yes. And also I'm the middle child. I'm not the first child. I'm not the the achiever one. And I do, it's very natural for me to want to support Mike. And I also, even in my professional life, I've been in a supportive role. Administrative supportive role. So it was very natural. But my biggest desire at that point when we wanted to try something new was I didn't enjoy Mike being away from home and traveling all that much. I felt like our relationship and our marriage suffered because of it. And that was really a motivator for me to want to try something totally new. And I didn't enjoy personally my job. When I was working in healthcare, there was a lot of micromanaging, there was a lot of control in the office, there was a lot of gossip. And I would come home and I knew theoretically, I don't want to bring problems from work at home, but it was really difficult to kind of distance myself from the office life. So I think I was in a point where I was really ready to try something totally new. And I know that we joked sometimes, we talked about, okay, we start this land business, the worst case scenario, the worst that can happen. Like I didn't even, at that point, I didn't want to go back to find a job. Obviously, if I had to, I could, but I thought the worst case scenario is we buy a trailer, we keep a property, we sell everything else, and we live on a trailer and we'll figure it out, So I think facing your worst fear has helped me a lot as well, because facing it was like, it's not that bad. I mean, as long as we're healthy, as long as it was, we both are healthy and are driven to make this dream come true, we can do it. So that was my position.
I love it. And the thing that's so cool about listening to both of you explain your versions of the story is that when you face the fear, and I first of all identify what the fear actually is, because it's so easy to stay in
Yes.
that comfort zone of this is just what we
Yes.
need to do. I need to find a job. But if you could step back and identify the challenge, you talked about the strain of Mike traveling so much and what it did to your relationship and wanting him to be home, as well as understanding that what you were doing from a professional standpoint wasn't fulfilling, and that you realized there was an opportunity to do something that, even if it didn't have the success that you hoped, you could still be happy with the lifestyle they created, even if it meant getting a trailer and traveling around on some of this vacant land, right? And I think when you look at it from that perspective, it empowers you so much more to make the right decisions. Let's talk a little bit more about land investing, right? So I'm curious, why land investing as kind of the first opportunity? I mean, there's single family homes, there's apartments, there's mobile park homes. What was it about land investing that caught your attention and made you decide this is the place you wanted to focus?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. It wasn't. I can say it wasn't anything overly analytical. Like, we didn't sit down and evaluate all the real estate options and kind of do things. But as I mentioned, I had been exploring. Well, I'll back up. Even from 2006, I would say I got my first exposure to Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that sparked in me this belief that you could enter the world of entrepreneurship / investing, and the concept of passive income and cash flowing businesses. And so that whole world, I would say, was opened up there in 2006 when, and it was actually, I think it was your book that I read,
Yes.
that you had there. But so that kind of set us down an initial path of looking at rental properties, different ways to generate cash flow. We dabbled in it, but then I would say we set it aside when we moved back to the U.S. And maybe in 2014 or so, I started looking at revisiting that and thinking about, okay, how can we get into side hustles? And so as I mentioned, I started exploring podcasts, different books. And, at some point very close together, I listened to two different people on a podcast that were doing land investing. And they were talking about, the great returns and the cash flow that it generates. And so in one of those podcasts, they referenced a person, or in our industry we call them gurus, right? There's these different people that put out these courses, and this one is shout out to Mark Podolsky. He has a program called the Land Geek, and he was at the time, and I'm sure he still does, but he had a toolkit that you could buy. That as I mentioned, it had it was a playbook of kind of how to get started. And so, it was something, and I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. And so I bought that. And then, fast forward 2 years later, it was something. But, land investing, it's a very approachable business. It has a very low cost of entry relative to single family homes or multifamily. I mean, you're talking hundreds or thousands of dollars to buy vacant land. The business model is also a little more approachable in that, you can do the whole business yourself. There's no renovations. You don't have to hire contractors, fix up properties. It's quite simply finding the right opportunity in the land. So there's a certain percentage of land owners that are willing, similar in the single family home, space. You just find a certain percentage of people that you approach that are willing to sell their land below market value. And so if you price, the buy versus the sell right, you can make 100, 200%, even, 1,000% return on your investment in the matter of days, if possible. It's just a matter of how quickly you can flip it. And so it was a very easy business model to get into in terms of, the risk. is pretty low relative to other investments, right? If you're talking, I mean, if you buy a piece of land, which we have never done, by the way, we've never bought a piece of land that we haven't sold. And we have bought some of the worst looking properties. I mean, you would think nobody is going to buy this, but there's an adage, and it's, the takeaway is basically there's a buyer for everything, really. There's people that want a mountain, that want a cliff, that want different aspects of things. So, but in the event that you get stuck with a piece of land, you have a piece of land, it's real property, and it's relatively inexpensive, right? You're talking a couple $1,000s max. And so the overhead of the business is also very, very inexpensive. And so, we just decided to go in on it. Then after a few years, we started thinking about more depreciable assets, and that can be single family, residential multifamily, or commercial multifamily. And, once we were, or storage units, or mobile home parks, or, there's several things out there.
Hey,
we
Mike,
did start to.
Before we go into the depreciable
Sure.
side of it, I want to make sure we understand kind of where we're at today. So let me recap a little bit of that, and then let's get into why you decided to go into the depreciable assets. So you talked about land investing, and Mark Podolsky, shout out to Mark. He was a guest on episode 74 of this show. And it's a great episode. And I advise anyone who's interested in land investing to go back and check that episode as well. Because what I recall about that episode and talking to Mark was really, as you started to allude to, the low cost. When you're buying apartment buildings, we just did $20 million worth of apartment buildings in 2021. Well, that's a pretty large capital injection, right? I mean, obviously we have a lender for, 75% of that. But it's still a pretty large, capital injection to acquire that amount of real estate. On the land side, you're talking about a fraction of those costs, right? I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, but not necessarily hundreds and millions of dollars to acquire this land. So I think that's something that's really interesting to understand. And then you talked about, it may not feel intuitive, but for any piece of land, there's someone who's looking to buy that. What we've seen is, especially coming out of the pandemic, there have been more and more people looking to acquire land, whether it be, your preppers, your doomsday folks, whatever it is. There are a lot of people who would be happy to have a plot of land that they can do whatever they want to do with it going forward. Not to mention, because, the other assets are, in high demand, we are seeing people who would like a piece of land, maybe let the overall demand increase, and then maybe they develop down the road. But as you're getting this cash flow, you got a great model. If you guys missed it, what Mike talked about was that they would buy the land and then turn around and sell it to another buyer, but they would carry the note. So now they're almost playing the bank, right? And have a mortgage, if you will, where they're getting passive income from someone paying them each month their piece of the mortgage. And if something were to happen, that person defaulted, well, guess what? They still have the piece of land that they own, and they could go and do the same thing again. And that you've never been, or you haven't been in a situation where you haven't been able to sell the land. So you're making this money, you're getting this passive income, you recognize this is great, but I got a large tax bill. So talk to me about how that made you start to look at more depreciable assets.
Yeah. So great segue there. So a couple of factors. So in addition to, the large tax bill, it is possible in the land space to invest in larger, either larger parcels of land or more expensive parcels of land. However, when you get up to a certain threshold, the amount of people that are willing to sell that property at a deep discount goes almost to zero, right? So it's really hard. If you think about buying a ranch from somebody, they're going to list it with a broker, and they're going to get their top dollar out of it. And so it also, there's an economy of scale, or a lack of economy of scale in, the land business. You have to put together a pretty big machine and do a lot of deals to stack up if you're going to replace your income. And so that took us several years to get, like, we were running on, savings as we transitioned to enough of an income to be in the black.
Mike, for that size cutoff, is it? I mean, what would you say that is between
Um,
where you could run it versus now you're running into these, larger
yeah.
investors where you
So
can't get those discounts?
our typical purchase is less than $10,000, and it's around on average $5,000 for a piece of land. Um, that's that's at least where we like to purchase, just because of the way the fundamentals of the math work. We can invest. We like to recoup our investment in or under a year, and then start making our profit beyond that. And so, that's about a sweet spot, somewhere 3 to 5,000, because most people are looking for a note payment of around what you would assume you would pay for a car, right? So if you can get a land payment between $250 and $500 a month, that you have enough of a population out there that is interested to do that. Once you start getting above that, the buying pool reduces. It's possible, it just takes a little bit longer. We have some larger notes on properties, but somewhere around there is kind of, we're chipping away at these and stacking up $250 notes, in order to build up a nice passive income book. So,
And I imagine the size of the land varies based on where it actually is, right? The
sure,
acreage.
yeah. If it's a dirt patch or a forested piece in the mountains or something, yeah, or it has a lake on it, yeah, definitely. It varies depending on the county, but it's a little bit there. But yeah, so that was also, I would say after 2 or 3 years, we have a good mature business model that we can go out and buy properties at scale. But that, coupled with with a desire to offset our taxes, because let's face it, taking 25 to 35% of your income and giving it to taxes is painful. So, if you can get rid of that legally, then why not do it, right? So, enter into the world of depreciable assets in the terms of rental properties or storage units or multifamily things. So we did at that point start doing some research, looking for what would be the best asset class to step into. I would say we spent a month or two kind of doing some research, looking at different programs, analyses, and there really wasn't a definitive direction that said this is the best asset class to go into. Aside from, if you think about residential versus commercial, almost everyone that we were looking at had either started in single family / smaller multifamily under 4 units, which is classified as residential. You purchase it on your own personal credit, and it's a loan type that you are personally responsible for. Most people either started there and were transitioning into commercial real estate, or they were bypassing it altogether and just going into larger commercial deals because of the economies of scale and the personal protection that it affords you in being able to purchase it, through an LLC or a company. And so, we did at some point think, okay, let's just go straight into larger scale deals. But, we kind of narrowed it down between storage units and multifamily. And at some point we got analysis paralysis and said, we're just picking a path and we're going. And so we went into multifamily as a course of action. But again, realizing that we can always pivot into something else down the road, right? If we get into it and we decide we don't like being landlords, or we don't like the space of multifamily, we can, and we probably will at some point. We haven't yet, but we would like to diversify into different asset classes. But for these past 2 years, we've really been diving deep into multifamily, and particularly in the syndication space, which is getting a group of investors together to purchase an asset and running it in that way. And so that's kind of been our focus in a parallel track from our land business for the last, I would say 18 months actively, 2 years. We did some research, and once we decided to get into syndications, we started researching the different syndications that are out there, and, who is our tribe that we want to, partner with. I think Ligia and I are both of a mindset. We did this with land with Mark, and we have done this in multifamily. We believed if we're going to do this full time, we owe it to ourselves to find a mentor, to join a group, to get coaching, and to accelerate that journey. And I would recommend that for almost anybody, really, to find a mentor that can help you along that process. Not that you can't do it on your own, but especially with something like multifamily, when you're talking, like you mentioned, 20 million in deals you did last year. Same for us. We did, 20 plus million in multifamily deals. Mistakes can be super costly, and so you owe it to yourself to have a good coach and mentor and a team around you to help do that right.
Yeah, Mike, you're spot on. I mean, it's when you talk about the scale of it and just there's so many moving parts, it's not that you can't figure it out. You've obviously did a great job figuring out the land business, but if there's a blueprint out there, if there's someone who has experience that can help you cut down the learning curve, avoid mistakes that they've made or that they see or that common investors make, it just makes sense to invest in that time. And I say in particular, if you're working with other people, if it's your money, by all means, do whatever you feel comfortable with.
Right.
But if you're going to partner with other people and their hard-earned money, do everything you can to set yourself up for success. Mike, with that said, I mean, the deals that you've done up to this point, and Mike and Ligia, are you on the active side, the GP side of the syndication? Are you doing some LP side as well, a mix of both, or how are you actually structuring these right now?
Yeah, we're mixing both. So we've done a progression. I would say our first few deals, we started as limited partners, just passive investing, really to get a feel for the investment and invest some money and enjoy the passive, depreciation that comes along with it. That in and of itself was really it checked the boxes we needed to check. I mean, we got great depreciation and a very minimal tax bill, but we're real estate professionals. And so we transitioned into general partners and playing lesser roles on the team. So capital raising, investor communications, trying to help out with asset management and just learning end to end the business. And then in November, we closed on our first deal as the key partners and lead sponsors on a $15 million asset. So we've kind of taken it from one end of the spectrum to the other. And, this year we're looking to do a bit of all of it. We want to close on 4 to 6 deals as leads. We'll invest passively in some deals. We'll raise capital and contribute to other deals and just try to play in a few different areas of the syndication space.
No, I appreciate that. And that's a great way to start. And I implore everyone to think about what Mike and Ligia just said. When you think about how to get scale, how to get some traction, first, you brought on a mentor to help learn the business, understand exactly what it looks like, what to look for, all of those different steps, get the blueprint. Okay. From there, you invested passively as a limited partner, gain some experience, get some traction, sharpen those skills. Then moving over to the GP side of the business, where now you're actively involved, and then ultimately moving over to the KP side, where now you are kind of really the lead operator on these deals, and you're open and flexible of the deal structure going forward. And I just think that's a great template to follow. You don't have to follow it to the T, but if you want to talk about how do you mitigate your risk and, really strengthen your learning curve, putting yourself in kind of the passenger seat or maybe even the back seat to start, getting that person who you can trust as an advisor, starting to work and put your capital to work on some of these deals, getting all the benefits, gaining that trust, gaining that confidence, moving over to the GP side. I just think that's a great trajectory to be on if you really want to do this full time and you really want to grow as a real estate professional. Ligia, I want to ask you this real quick before we move on to our round of insights. We've talked a lot about the transition you two have made going from corporate America into land investing, now into multifamily to help supplement that. I think one of the challenges that a lot of people face is working together as a team. Especially when I talk to couples, it's one of the things where whether both of them are full-time employees, one is full-time, one wants to get into real estate, there always seems to be this challenge of how to work together as a team. I'd love to hear your perspective of how you work as a team and any advice for anyone else on bringing in kind of their partners so that you can grow down the same path together.
I would say we work very, very well as a team, and I think it's I see two big reasons. So Mike and I have the same why. We have the same goal as a couple, and I think that keeping that in front of our eyes every day, we want to achieve the same thing, helps us navigate through all the details of everyday tasks and relationship and all that. And through the nature of our personalities, I like to tackle tasks. I like to do stuff. And Mike is more of a visionary. He likes to see the big picture. He likes to keep us in a good structure. So I think we work very well together in that way, because we don't step on each other's toes, and we don't feel territorial. I think that's one of the reasons why we work so well together. And as of today, I focus more on land business, and Mike focuses more on the multifamily aspect of our business, and that kind of fits really well together.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I think it was just great insights. You talked about, first of all, starting with your why. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see couples making is they're not on the same page of why they're trying to pursue something. If you are interested in real estate, and I assume if you're listening to this, you may be the one interested in real estate, but maybe your partner isn't. And maybe you need to understand the role real estate can play in your future, the future you're looking to create. And if you understand the why and the role that these different, strategies can play, it becomes a little easier to have these conversations. And we went through it. I went through it with my wife as well. We had a lot of conversations. We're both very interested in real estate, and we worked well together. But there became a point in time where, both of us were working full time. Both of us had, we had our kids. There was a point where we needed to take the business in a different direction. One of us really needed to focus on the business, while the other one kind of focused on the W-2. And you have to have that conversation where you both are on the same page of what you're hoping to get out of this, and that will inform the right path forward. So I really appreciate you sharing that and giving us a little glimpse into how you work together and how you manage to take control and lead the business. And I do think there's got to be some ownership that each person can take, because if it just becomes a boss type of scenario where one person is really the boss and making all the decisions, that's not fun either, and nobody wants to be in a situation where now you've got a boss that's your spouse. So I definitely think that you have to understand, as a partnership, who does what, who leads what, and grow from there. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Yeah. So for me, I would say, just playing off of what you were just saying. So I have a previous marriage before I met Ligia, and it did not work out for various reasons. But I would say the biggest reason was an alignment or a misalignment of our why. We got to a place in life where we had different wants and needs, and we just weren't kind of on the same path. And so, I jokingly say with Ligia, she got Mike 2.0, which I have learned many lessons, as we all do throughout life. And so as a result, I feel like I'm a better husband, a better person. I've kind of taken my lumps and kind of come out just different, transformed a little bit. So I think for me, that was, and I saw it as such, as a huge failure. And for me, I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of a first child. I'm driven. I'm a success-oriented, achievement-oriented. I have had to, in the course of my life, come to terms with even the word failure. Just that is such a visceral word for me in all aspects of my life, that I've really tried to transition that into, I try to see things not as failures, but as learnings, and as a course correction along a path. And so that's really something I've had to deal with. But, for me, that's kind of the ultimate one that I came across. So.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I really like Are you talking about a book, a certain book, or?
Well, like whether there's
Like
an app or
digital
yes.
something. Gosh, I don't know. We're not super techie.
All right, think we stumped you there. All right, no
Yes.
worries. We can come back if needed. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted most in the last year.
I would say the Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. That has been my number one recommendation.
That's a great book. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's mine as well. I'll back up for me. Recently read a book called The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. And it was just a beautiful, more of a personally minded book, but just a great outlook on life and purpose of life. So,
what's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Well, for us, we kind of have a ritual or a routine where I would say, we spend a few minutes in the morning reading. We have a short meditation typically. And then Ligia is a coffee drinker. I'm a tea drinker, but we will spend a few minutes each morning together drinking coffee, tea, having a light conversation. And then we start every day with a 15-minute huddle up where we look at, what actions do we need to achieve. And so I come from an operations background and I'm super operations focused, but, we start with annual goals, break those down into quarters, into weeks. And then within those weeks, we have certain things that we want to achieve. So we start each day just looking at, how has the week been? What do we still need to accomplish and go there? So,
what is your number one insight for investing?
Gosh, it really depends on the asset class, but just talking about multifamily syndications, I would say an often overlooked aspect is really dig in deep and get to know your lead sponsors. They are going to run the deal, and whether a deal works on paper or not is really takes a back seat to who is running the deal. So really get to know the people that are in charge of the money that you're going to be investing.
All right, I know you all are out in Colorado now and enjoying your 9,000 feet view of everything above the clouds, but you can pick there, or if you want to go back to your time in Texas, you select. But give me the best place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh, I would say the Birdhouse in Erie, Colorado.
Oh,
they serve ramen and tacos, but their ramen is out of this world good. It's so good. So if you're ever in the area and go to downtown Erie, go to Bird's House.
Just outside of Boulder.
All
Yeah, and I would say here, in terms of Colorado Springs, we love a place called the Burrowing Owl, and it's a pub, and we're both plant-based eaters. We just kind of eat vegan lifestyle, but it's a plant-based kitchen, and they do what you would call vegan junk food. So nachos, sloppy joes, all that kind of stuff. So when we need a fix, we go there.
I love it. Listen, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and you talking about, what it took to create Lifestyle 2.0, going from corporate America, starting to invest within land as really more of a side hustle, recognizing that you didn't want to relocate, went all in on investing in land, ultimately using that to start investing in multifamily and starting to create passive income. And now you've got your own multifamily business as well. For folks who want to learn more about you, they can check out your website, DeatonEquityPartners.com. There, I know you've got some information they can check out, some downloads. So be sure to check that out there. We'll make sure we put a link to that in our show notes. So be sure to check that out. Mike and Ligia, I just want to thank you again for coming on Multifamily Insights. Hope you have a great day, and we look forward to staying in touch with you.
It's been a pleasure, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.